Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming live at you again for another Film Fanatic show. Hope everyone's doing good. It's 9:37 on a Tuesday. Pretty hot day. Supposed to be in the 80s today. It feels pretty warm. Fans are going. I love this weather. So I hope everyone's doing good. Yeah. So I'm in the midst right now of. I just kind of finished up watching the videos or watching the movies and the two different versions, and I am in the midst of uploading some of the videos. There's going to be a few of them around this really incredible movie called Footprints from 1975. It's an Italian giallo film. Just an amazing film, and I'm doing two. Well, I'm actually doing a few shows around it. I reviewed this movie when I bought it, and I really liked it. But now I've seen it a few times, and it's interesting because when I went to was craving to watch it because it had been a couple of years, again I had only seen it once. It was put out by Severin, amazing release, and I really liked it when I first saw it, which was about a year ago. So the other night or last week, I wanted to was craving to watch it again, and so I got it out, and I realized, oh shit, there's two different versions of the film. There's an Italian cut, and then there's also an American cut. And there's a bunch of special features. And for whatever reason, I didn't really watch any of those versions, and I didn't really check out any of the special features. And I kind of kicked myself to as to why I didn't do that. But I mean, I own it, so I can do it on my time, in my leisure. But the other night, the last few nights, I watched both cuts, and then I watched all the special features, and really, what an extraordinary movie. So I got a handful of videos coming up on Film Fanatic for this channel about Footprints. Again, I did do an initial when I first bought the movie. I watched it, but then I realized there was, and I, did a show on buying it on Blu-ray like I usually do. But I didn't realize, again, that there's all these multiple cuts of the movie included in this beautiful package. So I'm doing a review on the Italian cut, and then also the American cut, which I finished last night, and as well as some other videos about the certain aspects of this amazing film. So stay tuned for that. So it's going to be about 3 or 4 videos. So really exciting. Again, that's one of the things that I do. I usually, when I buy a movie, and Footprints was a movie I bought cold. Usually when I buy a movie, if I'm into it, I will, watch it multiple times. I look at movie watching almost the same thing as, like, if I buy an album by a band I really love, of course I'll listen to it over and over again, or not sometimes. But I do the same thing with films. If I'm into a movie, or whether it's a movie I had seen before and I just bought it for the first time on Blu-ray, or whether it's a movie I've never seen before and it was, a cold thing of just, buying it without having seen it, I will revisit that movie multiple times. So it's the same thing for me. So really excited to present these videos on this movie that I never, I've never heard anything about, and the reason I got it was it's because it's a Severin release, and Severin is one of the best boutique labels out there. So stay tuned for these videos, and today's show is going to be on one of my favorite directors of all time. I kind of think, as far as modern directors, I think he's the best around, and that is Denis Villeneuve, who is an amazing director from Canada, Canadian director, and he's just got the most, right now, I think one of the most impeccable track records ever as far as being a director and filmmaker. Everything he does, everything, at least for me, everything he does and everything he touches is gold. I pretty much own all, with the exception of 1 or 2 movies, I pretty much own all of his films on Blu-ray or DVD, but mostly Blu-ray, and I want to complete them all. Um, and I wanted to talk. I did a show a couple of years ago on Denis Villeneuve, I believe, but today's show is going to be about the big, huge news that he has been named to be the new director for the James Bond franchise, which is pretty exciting. So I wanted to talk about that, my feelings around that, kind of his track record with some of the films that he's done and some of the movies he's written, and also I think as a filmmaker, some of the you know impossible feats that he's been able to accomplish. And I wanted to kind of talk about my feelings around all those things. The first movie that I ever saw that was directed by Denis Villeneuve was Prisoners, starring Jake Gyllenhaal and Hugh Jackman. And it was kind of I don't know, kind of funny how I discovered him. I remember, it came out. Prisoners came out quite a few years ago, and I remember I was Prisoners had come out on DVD way back when, and I was hanging out with a girl that I was in a relationship with, and and then we kind of reunited for a brief time. And one day, one weekend, she came over to the house, and we watched Prisoners together. It was really funny because I Prisoners had come out, and I've always liked Hugh Jackman, but this was the movie. Prisoners was the movie that really I've always loved him as an actor, but Prisoners was the movie that really made me look at him as an actor in an entirely different light, and because he was playing such a different role, and it was funny because that movie came out on DVD, and I remember seeing it on the shelves at Opera House Video in Belfast, and I don't know, I kept passing on it. I kept looking at it every time I was in there at the time when it had come out, and I just thought it looked, I don't know, it looked kind of generic. It didn't look very exciting, and then finally I decided to rent it, and I watched it here with my friend, and I was just like, holy shit, what is this? This is amazing. Why didn't I watch this sooner? This is such a suspenseful, gut wrenching movie, super intense. I was blown away. And after I saw Prisoners, I was just like, wow, Denis Villeneuve, who is this guy? Who is this director? And after that, I just kind of became obsessed with Denis Villeneuve as a director. Just such an amazing track record. Um, the movie before that, Enemy, with Jake Gyllenhaal, is another film that I got a couple of years later, which is again another amazing film, kind of a sci-fi film noir, very suspense laden film, pretty trippy movie, but an amazing movie. And I got that on Blu-ray shortly after, and unfortunately, I had let a person borrow that movie, and he never gave it back to me. I was super pissed, so I don't own it anymore on Blu-ray. But anyway, so I got really into Denis Villeneuve as a director. I ended up buying, and I think I rented it first, and then I bought it on Blu-ray like as soon as I could. Denis Villeneuve's Sicario with Benicio del Toro. That movie might be my favorite film of his. That movie is such an intense experience about the Mexican or the drug trade, um, and a real deep look at the CIA's kind of nefarious position in the drug war. An astounding movie, just amazing. I really want to watch that movie again. I'm a huge Benicio del Toro fan, and I think that movie's the best thing he's ever done. And then another film that he did, which is one of the greatest sci-fi movies I think ever made, The Arrival. I got a chance. I did see that in a theater. What an incredible experience! What a beautiful movie. One of the greatest modern day kind of sci-fi films about alien invasion. I also own that on Blu-ray. And then when I mentioned at the top of the show that Denis Villeneuve has done, I mean, he's written and directed, just amazing original work, but he's also taken on projects that, at face value, you're like, there's no way he can pull this off. There's no way this can be successful. But yet he always pulls through and just completely kicks ass. And examples of that or are when he decided to make a sequel to one of the greatest science fiction movies of all time, Blade Runner, and he directed the sequel starring Ryan Gosling, Blade Runner 2049. I also saw that movie in the theater, and I am a huge fan of that movie. I think that movie is just incredible. It's a standalone film, and I also think it's like one of the greatest sequels ever made. I of course bought that again on Blu. I bought that on Blu-ray as well. Um, just such an incredible film in every way. And then it was announced a few years later that he was going to be doing and tackling something even more ambitious. uh, Dune. He was going to remake Dune, and I was just like, wow, like that's insane. And I remember seeing the first trailer for Dune, and I was floored by it. And that movie was delayed because of COVID for a couple of years, and then it eventually came out. And that movie is a masterpiece. I love the David Lynch version, and there's a few good like television or made for TV movies of Dune. And Dune is my favorite science fiction book of all time. And Denis Villeneuve's Dune, his version of that is just, it's the best. It's the best rendition, the best version of that book. Absolutely incredible. And then it was divided into two parts, and then the sequel came out. I did see that. I also saw that in the theater. Incredible. An absolute masterpiece of a film. I almost think it's better than the original, and just incredible. So it's just like one movie after another. Denis Villeneuve is, I think, kind of a modern day Kubrick. Stanley Kubrick is my favorite director of all time, and I feel like Denis Villeneuve, even though he has a very different style, Denis Villeneuve, I think, as far as like contemporary and modern directors, I think pound for pound, um, you know, his his ability to take on so many different genres, you know, science fiction, drama, action, even movies that have elements of horror like The Enemy, um, is astounding. and and every film, I think, every project he's ever been involved has been is gold. Like, and when I think of a director, I think Denis Villeneuve, as far as modern contemporary directors, he's like the best around. And one of the reasons, or one of the things that that helps me arrive to kind of that feeling or conclusion is, the just the track record, the consistency of a director. Because that doesn't really happen all the time. It's a hard thing to come across, especially in this day and age. Like Kubrick, everything he did was gold, and so no misfires. I'm a huge Quentin Tarantino fan, but I think his body work is absolutely incredible. I think the one movie that he directed that was a total misfire was Death Proof with Kurt Russell. That movie was just totally fell flat and drove itself off the tracks. But Denis Villeneuve, I feel like every movie he's done, there's so much variety. Again, he's incredibly ambitious, pushes the boundaries, pushes the limits, and can tackle all kinds of different genres. And to be able to tackle, these monumental movie projects, like trying to make a sequel to one of the greatest, or making a sequel to one of the greatest science fiction movies of all time, Blade Runner, and being so successful, at least in my book, and then remaking Dune, one of the greatest science fiction novel out there, and following on the footsteps of what David Lynch did. Just incredible. and for it to be as good and just being the best versions around of that particular story. Just incredible. And I right now I believe Denis Villeneuve is in the midst of shooting Messiah, which I'm doing Messiah, which I'm super excited. Lately, I've been on a huge Dune kick, and I've been reading all of the books. About seven, well, about 4 or 5 months ago, I started doing audiobooks. So I've been reading a lot of books that way, and I really love it. And I am in the midst of reading all of the books in the series, and just amazing. I had never read any of the other Dune books after the first one, so it's been just amazing. And Messiah is just, uh, it's probably my favorite so far out of the newer ones that I've read, or older ones, but newer for me. So I believe right now Denis Villeneuve is in the midst of shooting Dune Messiah, which I can't wait. I can't wait. I don't know when it's going to come out, probably in the next couple of years or whatever. But the biggest news that just came out recently was, the James Bond with Daniel Craig kind of came to his tenure at in that franchise kind of came to an end. And Daniel Craig, I'm a huge James Bond fan, and my favorite actor who's ever played James Bond is definitely Daniel Craig. I'm an old school James Bond fan too. I love the old ones. Um, the only films in the franchise that I'm not really totally sold on because I felt they got a little bit um, cockamamie, if that's a word that I can use to describe the movies, where I couldn't really buy into it. Was when Pierce Bronson played James James Bond. I do want to see those movies again, but those are the only movies I felt like in the franchise that were kind of a misfire. Um, but ever since then, I feel overall the movies have been just really great. Quantum of Solace is the only Daniel Craig movie I was not really a fan of. I think that was also anticlimactic and kind of a misfire as far as a film. But overall, I am a huge fan of all of the movies. And Daniel Craig finished up with the last film, and it was announced that obviously they were going to continue the franchise, and that they were basically searching for a new director, and also searching far and wide for a new actor to play James Bond. And that's been going on for quite a while. There was lots of speculation, of course, of who was going to be who, and all these things. And it was just recently announced, I think, like 2 weeks ago or so, that Denis Villeneuve has been officially tapped and named as the new director for James Bond. And I'm like, holy shit! Like, that's my first reaction was like, wow, like that's a game changer. Like, yeah, I mean, the Sam Mendes, a really great director who, of course, directed American Beauty, directed some of the James Bond films. So there has been lots of examples, or a few examples of like real high caliber directors uh, going into the world of James Bond and directing a few films. So, but I think Danny Villeneuve is again next level. Sam Mendes is a really great director, but I don't think he's quite as consistent. Um, Road to Perdition is amazing. American Beauty is amazing. His other films, they're okay. They're okay, but those two movies are just amazing. Road to Perdition is just a badass movie. And he's a very talented director, don't get me wrong. But Denis Villeneuve, again, I go back to the track record of his long career, and just looking at the movies he's done, and it's just like, hands down the best. So I'm really excited to see what this will be, and what somebody so talented as Denis Villeneuve, what he could bring, or what he can bring to this franchise. And um, whether the franchise or whether the next James Bond film or films will be more with a serious tone, because Denis Villeneuve's films are very intense. Like, he's a very serious, the tone the tone of most of his films is very serious and kind of dire, and they have a rawness to them. They're pretty dark, um, and they're intelligent. You know, you have to you can't put on a Denis Villeneuve or film and put it on on the background and like go do laundry and make food. It's like no, he made films for what the purpose was or is of watching a movie, like actually watching a movie, and then also, his whole thing is about experiencing his movies like in its true format, like going to a really beautiful theater or getting it on a real beautiful, 4K edition or Blu-ray edition. Like his movies are all about that truly immersive experience. His movies are meant to be seen on the big screen. So it's really exciting to see what will come out of this. And it hasn't been announced yet on who the new James Bond will be. So I'm really curious what that's going to be too. I mean, but with Denis Villeneuve as the commander in chief for the James Bond franchise now, and I assume like he'll do probably at least a couple of movies, at least 2 or 3 movies. That's really exciting. So I'm pretty pumped to see what direction the franchise will take. Whether it will stay in that kind of tradition of some of his films, of where his films are very serious and gritty. So we'll see. But I wanted to make a little video on my thoughts and how I'm really really excited on that news, and that again, there were all these rumors for a couple of years on who was going to direct the new film or films in the James Bond world, or who was going to be the next James Bond, and all these rumors. But again, it was just made official as of like I think earlier this week or last week that Denis Villeneuve is definitely the new director. So yeah, I'm super super stoked, super excited. So yeah, we'll see what happens. And I think it's in good hands. I have total confidence in him as a director. He's got the best track record around as far as modern directors. So yeah, I just wanted to make a video and share my thoughts about Denis Villeneuve and this recent news of him being the new director for James Bond's pretty amazing, pretty awesome. So thanks again, and we will see you next time. Peace.